Okay, and now we are going to talk about the upcoming assignment that is literature review writing. And I'm going to use Alexis topic as an example to explain the literature review process for you. First of all, I'm going to take you through the rubric for that assignment, for the rubric for the literature review assignment. So what I expect from you is that in the literature review, you start with an introduction section where you basically write an introductory paragraph where you explain your topic or the problem that you are investigating. So, more like the statement of the problem from your introduction, very briefly. And then you can write a sentence or a paragraph about what the readers should expect to read in this section. And so, kind of a transitionary sentence to go from the introduction to starting the literature review. Now, I expect that you will choose at least 8 research studies relevant to your topic uh, and research papers, peer reviewed, that are relevant to your study using Google Scholar or your library database. Now, some of you may already have done this part when you were doing the annotated bibliography. At that time, some of you already downloaded and selected and read studies related to your topic. So you should not worry about this part if you already did that. Now, the next is reviewing the papers you choose, download, and read based on what you learned in the literature review module. And then uh, how you are going to write after that is the first thing is that you are going to synthesize or you are going to write a synthesis of the studies. So if you remember in the annotated bibliography section, I asked you to write summaries of each study individually. So you provided a full reference, then you included a summary of the study and how that study was connected to your study. Now, synthesis is different in that you are just trying to make connections uh, between these studies. What variables did they measure? What methods did they use? What were their findings? And how are those findings connected to your study? Or what did you learn from for your study from those studies? So technically, you are writing less compared to annotated bibliography, but you are trying to tell a story here through these 8 or 10 studies. You try to identify themes or best practices in these studies. So kind of you develop an argument using these studies as resources. And I have provided an example of how we write literature review uh, on Canvas. That paper was written by a group of students in an earlier class, so you can use that as an example. Or you can technically follow the format of one of the papers that you select for your literature review. So the idea for the literature review is just to create a dialogue among the studies that you have downloaded or you have read and you believe are relevant to your study. So for example, for Alexis study, she wants to see how students use social media during the current pandemic, or what type of information do they seek through social media during the current pandemic. So overall, the social media usage during this pandemic is her broader topic. Now, for her literature review, uh, college students, social media usage, and information seeking are some key terms. So she wants to focus on when she's doing her literature review, she will try to find out studies that have covered these topics or include these keywords or concepts or variables in their study. So Alexis can start with a narrative. So write your literature review as a narrative, as if you are telling a story, but then provide references. So for example, Alexis can say that Brandon did a study in, let's suppose, uh, Kentucky, and he found that students use social media to basically get information about the status of their grades, to get in touch with their relatives and friends, and to stay updated about the status of the opening of college after a tornado, for example. But, and then you say, but uh, Patrick did a study in California, and the students used it for totally different purposes. The only purpose was to stay in touch with their families and escape the traumatic events that they went through in the after a tornado or after a fire, a bush, like after fires in California, something like that. So try to make connections between and among studies. And then you can say that, well, there was another study done in, let's suppose, in Alabama, but that study was only done with female college students. And the study concluded that females use social media to get information about brands, for example, or about political events around them, to get in touch with their sorority friends, something like that. So basically, the idea is to give us an overall picture of what type of research people have done and what were their conclusions. And at the end, then you write a paragraph kind of telling us how these studies are connected to your study. What did you learn about your study? And what gaps did you find in the earlier studies that you are trying to address in your study? So for example, the gaps don't need to be like something big. It could be just that you can say that, well, all the previous studies were mostly focused on big universities, uh, what we call flagship universities. Those just included are interviewed male. They just did interviews, or they just did surveys, or they just focused on one variable compared to another variable, and I want to get a holistic picture. And for Alexis, it's another. So, for example, one of the gap that I can right now think about is that none of those studies, whatever you read, recently done, was not done in the context of pandemic. Like pandemic is an unusual situation. So one of the arguments for Alexis at the end of the papers could be that this pandemic has created a totally different situation from what people uh, that you discuss in the literature review observe. For example, Brandon 2019, Patrick 2018, providing references are in-text citation. So you basically tell them that, okay, here are the findings in the context of crisis on campus, how students use social media. That's what previous researchers have said. But my study is different because I'm trying to examine the student usage of social media during a pandemic. And during a pandemic where students are facing financial crisis, they are not sure of the status of their class, they need more help in preparing for their classes. So the usage may change, and that's what I'm trying to explore in my study. So kind of try to create a dialogue. Its literature review is different than the annotated bibliography. In annotated bibliography, you just provided summaries to each study. Now you are kind of trying to create a dialogue among those studies, how those are similar, different. So take these studies, the studies that you are reviewing, as 8 or 10 students in the class. let's suppose we are discussing a topic in class, and there are 8 or 10 people, so everyone is uh, sharing his or her opinion about the topic, and at the end you are kind of summarizing that whole discussion and telling us what are the key learning points and what do we need to figure out in future. So what points did they miss? So suppose there are 13 or 15 people in class and they are already discussing different issues. Some people are talking about the same things again and again. Some are coming up with different opinions. And now you are the last one to speak. So your basically goal is to figure out what would be your intellectual contribution or scientific contribution to this dialogue that they are having. So you basically want to observe their points, their strengths, the weaknesses of their arguments, and see what you could add from your side to this dialogue. You just don't want to repeat what they have already done or said. You want to say something new. And that is only possible when you understand what the people before you have said. Just the difference is that in the literature review, you are reading scientific literature from others, and in the class discussion, it's just people opinion. But I just used that as an example. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir. So basically, you're not summarizing. You're just trying to find information to better your research topic.
Yeah, so you are not just providing the summaries like you provided in your earlier annotated bibliography. You are
Mhm.
trying to find links, connecting links among these studies, and you are kind of developing a story based off of those studies, using those as references.
Okay.
So write it in a narrative style. You are telling a story using these as references.
Gotcha.
There
Okay.
should be coherence in your writing. By coherence, I mean those should look like, so you are still discussing 8 to 10 studies and providing references to them,
Mhm.
but your overall document or story should look like coherent, a narrative, and a solid story. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
So you are relying on 7, 8 people to tell your story, to tell the story in your words, but still you are referring to them. So, for example, at the end of a class discussion, I ask you or I ask Alexis to provide, to summarize the discussion, today's discussion for us. So she will summarize, or you will summarize it in your words, but you will refer to people. So you can say that people stressed on um, emotional support during this time of crisis, as Patrick said that, and Patrick said this based on his research. And others, the students also focused on the importance of teacher and student communication to improve students' mental health, as Rebecca said something, or as Jada said something, or Matt said something. So you are telling this story, but you are referring to those people,
Yes, sir.
to the
Gotcha.
knowledge that you have gained. So make sure that you provide proper references.
Okay.
And you can also read the introduction or literature review of one of the studies that is the most relevant to your study, or you can go to Canvas and find the sample study and look at their literature review, like how did they develop their argument using the references. So just tell the story. Research is storytelling, but it's factual storytelling.
Yes, sir.
I have another
Alex,
question.
yes, yes, please.
Okay, so on Google Scholar, some of the sources say get access, and like I could not figure out how to do that.
So when they say get access, you can get access to those articles using the library. Or if you are unable to access those articles, email them to me. I'll try to get those articles for you. And this is for everyone. If you are unable to get access to a full article through Google Scholar, you can access it through your library database. If you are unable to get access to it through your library database, please send it to me and I'll try to get that article for you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Welcome.